Don't open that folder, Mr. Pelham. Howard Pelham stopped halfway through the front hall of his own house, his right hand already reaching for the dark leather portfolio on the entry table, the one his assistant had set out for him the night before, alongside his coat and his car keys, and the printed agenda for the 9 o'clock board meeting downtown. He had been moving through his morning routine, the way he had moved through it for 40 years. Coffee at 6, a half hour of email, a shower, then the door. No hesitation, no deviation. He looked down. A girl was standing beside the hall table, her back against the wall, as if she had been there a long time and had simply been waiting for him to notice her. She was small, 10 years old, maybe 11, with dark braids and a purple sketchbook pressed flat against her chest like a shield. He recognized her, Calla, Winifred's daughter. He had seen her around the house for the better part of 2 years, usually sitting cross-legged somewhere out of the way, drawing in that same sketchbook, making herself invisible the way children learn to do in houses where adults are always busy. He had never once spoken to her directly. "What did you say?" Howard asked. Calla did not shrink from his voice the way children usually did. She looked up at him with an expression that was too careful, too still for someone her age. "The folder," she said. "Someone was in your study last night. They had it open." Howard set his coffee cup down on the table beside the portfolio. He did not touch the portfolio itself. Something in the evenness of the girl's voice made him want to be careful. "Who was in my study?" "Mr. Drury," she said it quietly. "It's the way you say a name when you're not sure if saying it out loud will get you in trouble. He was on the phone. I was in the hall doing my drawings because it was cool near the window. I heard him come in." "Nathan." Howard kept his face still. Nathan Drury had been his son-in-law for 6 years. He had married Howard's daughter Lee on a Saturday in October in the garden of this house, under a row of white lights that Howard had paid for, and that he had stood beneath feeling the uncomplicated happiness of a man watching his daughter be happy. Nathan worked in finance. He was pleasant, reliable, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and showed up on time. Howard had given him a seat on 2 of Pelham Capital's advisory boards because it seemed natural and because Lee had asked him to. He had never given him a key to his study. "Calla," Howard said slowly. He pulled out the chair from the hall bench and sat down so that his eyes were level with hers. The same way you might approach a bird that hadn't yet decided whether to fly. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't skip anything," she told him. It had been close to midnight. She couldn't sleep. She had come downstairs to sit by the window in the side hall, because it was the coolest part of the house and because the moonlight made the garden look like a painting, and she liked to draw it. The study door was slightly open, not the way it usually was at night, which was completely closed. A light was on inside, low like a phone screen or a desk lamp turned all the way down. She had heard Nathan's voice through the gap. She hadn't meant to listen, but she heard a name, Pelham, and then she heard something that had stayed in her head all night like a splinter she couldn't reach. "He'll sign it today," Nathan had said. "He always signs without reading if I walk him through the summary. He trusts me." A pause. Then, once it's done, the original language won't matter. The new version is what gets filed. Calla had pressed herself against the wall and stayed very still. A few minutes later, the light went out. The door clicked shut. She had waited until she heard Nathan's footsteps going back upstairs before she moved. She hadn't known what to do. She had thought about telling her mother, but her mother was already asleep, and she didn't want to get in trouble for being downstairs. She had thought about being wrong. She had decided she wasn't wrong. Howard sat on the bench in the front hall and listened to his own heartbeat. The portfolio on the table contained the final documents for the Caldwell merger, a transaction he had been building toward for 8 months. The deal would restructure the ownership of Pelham Capital's 3 largest holdings. Nathan, as a designated advisory board member, had been copied on the process. Howard had trusted him with the summaries. He had not, however, shown him the final language on the equity clauses. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out his reading glasses. Then, carefully, he unlatched the portfolio and opened it. The documents were there. They looked exactly as they always looked. White pages, clean print, his name at the top. He turned to the 3rd page, then the 7th, then the equity clause on page 12. He read the clause twice, then he read it a 3rd time. It was not what he had approved. The language was close enough that a man walking through a summary would not catch it. But the clause on voting rights had been shifted. Under the new wording, a co-signatory could exercise proxy authority over the primary shareholder in cases of extended unavailability, a phrase that had not existed in any draft Howard had reviewed. The co-signatory listed was a company registered in Delaware that Howard did not recognize. He closed the portfolio. He sat there for a long moment. He thought about the last 8 months. He thought about every meeting where Nathan had been in the room. He thought about Lee, who was upstairs right now asleep, who had chosen this man and trusted him and built a life beside him, and he made himself breathe slowly and carefully, the way a man breathes when he cannot afford to feel what he is actually feeling. Then he took out his phone and called Harmon Chase. Harmon was his attorney, 71 years old. He had been a senior partner at a firm downtown before Howard had hired him away 15 years ago. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had already been awake. "Howard, you're calling early." "Harmon, I need you to listen and not ask questions until I'm finished." There was a pause. In 22 years, Howard had used that exact phrase 3 times. Harmon knew what it meant. "Go ahead," he said. Howard told him about the clause. He read it aloud, word for word, from the document in front of him. He told him about Calla. He told him about the phrase, "He always signs without reading if I walk him through the summary," and the way it had sounded, calm and certain, in the dark of a house where Howard had lived for 31 years. When he finished, Harmon was quiet for 5 full seconds. "The Delaware Company," he said. "What's the registration name?" Howard read it off the page. "I need 40 minutes, Harmon said. "Don't go to that meeting yet. Don't tell Nathan you've looked at the documents. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. I'll call you back." Howard ended the call. He put the portfolio back exactly as he had found it, clasp latched in that particular way, angled slightly to the left. He did not want Nathan to know the folder had been examined any more carefully than usual. He walked back to the kitchen and poured himself another cup of coffee. He stood at the counter and looked out through the window at the garden, at the white lights still strung from the oak tree from a party 2 summers ago that he had never taken down because Lee had said she liked them. He thought about how a man could build something for 40 years and still not see clearly what was standing right beside him in the dark. Calla appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Is it bad?" she asked. "Come sit down," he said. She climbed onto one of the bar stools at the island. She set her sketchbook flat on the counter and folded her hands on top of it, and the gesture was so deliberate, so composed, that Howard felt something move through him that he did not have a name for. He poured her a glass of orange juice without asking. "You did the right thing telling me," he said. "I want you to know that first." She nodded once, like she had been waiting to hear it, and could now move on to the next thing. "Is someone going to get in trouble?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Is it Mr. Drury?" "I think so." He paused. "But I need to find out exactly how much trouble and exactly why before anyone does anything. Do you understand what I mean by that?" She picked up her orange juice. "Like how you don't pull out a splinter all at once," she said. "You have to see how deep it goes first." Howard looked at her for a long second. "Exactly like that," he said. Harmon called back in 38 minutes. The Delaware Company was a shell, incorporated 14 months ago, no assets, no employees, registered to an address that turned out to be a postal store in Wilmington. The sole officer on record was a man named Paul Sexton, who had incorporated 4 similar entities in 3 states over the past decade. 2 of those entities had been named in civil fraud cases, once in Texas, once in Illinois. Both cases had been settled quietly. Both involved family businesses where a trusted insider had introduced altered documents late in a deal process. Nathan Drury had made 11 phone calls to a number registered to Paul Sexton in the last 60 days. "He has done this before," Harmon said. "Not the same play, but the same method. Find a family business. Find the inside man. Insert language. Wait for the signature." Howard thought about Nathan sitting across from him at Christmas dinner. Nathan helping him carry boxes to the car after the office move. Nathan standing in the garden at Lee's wedding, holding her hand, looking like a man who had everything he wanted and nothing to hide. "Does Lee know?" Howard asked. "There's no indication of it," Harmon said. "Sexton's pattern is to work through one contact only. He would not have told Nathan to involve her. She's a variable he can't control." Howard closed his eyes. Both things can be true at once, he thought. A man can be someone's husband and someone else's instrument. And a woman can love a person and still not know who that person really is. "Tell me the options," he said. Harmon told him. They could go to the authorities immediately. They had the altered document, the shell company, Nathan's call records, Calla's account. It was enough to open an investigation. Nathan would be questioned. The merger would be halted. The whole thing would move through the courts for months, possibly longer. And Paul Sexton would have time to cover his tracks. or they could let the morning play out. Howard could attend the meeting. He could sit across from Nathan and listen to his son-in-law walk him through the summary, the way Nathan had told someone he always did. And then, instead of signing, Howard could produce the original approved language, which Harmon had a certified copy of on file, and watch Nathan explain the discrepancy in front of the full board. The second way closes more doors, Harmon said. Then we do it the second way, Howard said. He drove himself to the meeting. He had told Reuben there was a route change, that he would handle the car himself this morning. He needed the 40 minutes alone to assemble his face into something that looked ordinary. Nathan was already in the conference room when Howard arrived. He was standing near the window in his good gray suit, talking to two board members, relaxed in the particular way of a man who knows exactly how the next hour is going to go. He smiled when Howard walked in. "Morning," he said. "Traffic okay?" "Fine," Howard said. "Let's get started." The meeting moved the way these meetings moved. Attorneys, accountants, the corporate secretary with her recording device. Howard sat at the head of the table and listened to the overview. He asked two questions. He nodded at the right moments. He watched Nathan, who sat to his left, turning pages with a steady hand, saying things like, "As you can see on page 7, and the key language is right here at the top of the clause," steering Howard's eyes toward the parts he wanted him to read and away from the parts he didn't. When they reached page 12, Nathan said, "This is the equity clause. It's standard. You've seen language like this before. Boilerplate, co-signatory provision." Howard nodded slowly. He picked up his pen. "Actually," he said, "I'd like to read this one carefully." There was a pause in the room, the kind that lasts less than a second but feels longer. Nathan smiled, easy and pleasant. "Of course," he said. "Take your time." Howard read the clause aloud. Then he set down his pen and looked up. "Harmon," he said, "would you share the document you brought?" Harmon, who had been sitting at the far end of the table as general counsel, opened his folder and slid a set of papers to the board chair. "Certified copy of the originally approved language," he said quietly, "dated and countersigned 8 weeks ago by all parties present." The room went very still. The board chair looked at the 2 pages side by side. She looked at Nathan. She looked at Howard. Nathan's face had not changed. That was the thing Howard would remember later, that it did not change immediately. It stayed pleasant, attentive, the same face he had looked at across Christmas dinner. And then something behind it went out, very quietly, the way a lamp goes out when the power cuts, and what remained was just the structure of a face with nothing animating it. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "there may have been a version error in the final compile." "Nathan," Howard said. He said it gently. He said it the way you say someone's name when they are about to say something they cannot take back. "Don't." The meeting ended. The board chair called a recess. Harmon made 3 calls from the hallway. By noon, the attorneys connected to Paul Sexton's Delaware company had received a letter of notice. By 3 in the afternoon, Nathan Drury was sitting in a conference room on another floor of the same building, answering questions from 2 people who had driven up from the U.S. Attorney's office. Howard did not stay for that part. He drove home. He sat with Lee for 2 hours that evening. He told her carefully, "The way you carry something fragile, not everything at once, but enough." She did not cry immediately. She sat very still on the living room couch with her hands in her lap and looked at the window the way people look at windows when they are not seeing what is outside them. Then she said, very quietly, "I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. I just knew." Howard put his hand over hers. He did not say aloud what he was thinking, that her not knowing the specifics may have been the very thing that kept her safe. He thought it, he held it, he let it stay unsaid. Later that night, after Lee had gone to bed and the house was quiet, he walked around to the back of the property where the small caretaker's cottage sat behind a row of boxwoods. He knocked softly. Winifred answered in her robe. Not surprised exactly. She had the look of someone who had been waiting to know whether she needed to be worried. He told her what he could, that her daughter had seen something and had found the courage to speak when staying silent would have been so much easier. That what Calla had done that morning had changed the entire course of what came next. Winifred listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was still for a long moment. "She was up past midnight," she said quietly. "I was going to talk to her about it." "Don't," Howard said. He almost smiled. "Please." In the weeks that followed, the federal case moved faster than expected. Nathan cooperated in exchange for consideration on sentencing. Paul Sexton was indicted on fraud charges in 2 jurisdictions. The investigation reached back 10 years and found 3 other families who had not seen it coming. 2 of them had signed the documents before anyone caught the discrepancy. and the untangling had cost them years and money they would never fully recover. Howard restructured the Caldwell merger under the original terms. He appointed Harmon to a new oversight role, with a salary that made Harmon tell him he was being unreasonable. He told Harmon that was not his problem. Winifred was offered a larger cottage on the property, one with a proper yard where Calla could draw outside in the mornings without having to sit on the floor of a hallway. She took 3 days to think about it, and then she said yes. He enrolled Calla in the school on the other side of the city, the one with the art program she had been on the wait list for since the year before. He did not tell Winifred what it cost. He signed the paperwork himself and called it a standing arrangement. One Saturday morning in early spring, he found Calla sitting on the low stone wall near the south garden, her sketchbook open on her knees. She was drawing the magnolia tree he had planted along the fence line the previous fall. He sat down beside her and looked at the page. She was good. She had been good all along. He had simply never stopped moving long enough to look. "Calla," he said. "Mr. Pelham, I want to ask you something." She looked up from the sketchbook. "That morning, when you were deciding whether to say something or stay quiet, what made you decide to speak?" She thought about it. She was the kind of person who thought before she answered. She did not fill silence for the sake of filling it. "I kept thinking about what would happen if I didn't," she said. "Not just to you. I thought about that. But I also kept thinking about how it would feel to know I hadn't said anything. Like, I'd still know. Even if nobody else ever found out. I'd have to live with knowing I knew and didn't say it." Howard looked out across the garden for a long moment. "That's the whole thing," he said quietly. "That's the entire thing right there." She went back to her drawing. He sat beside her in the morning light and said nothing else for a long time, and it was the kind of silence that does not need to be filled. The kind that settles over a place after something difficult has passed through it and left it cleaner than it was before. The most dangerous deceptions do not come from strangers. They come from people who know which folder sits on your entry table, who know you never read past the summary, who have learned your habits so well they can use them against you. And the people most likely to see through them are the ones you have never thought to notice, the ones sitting quietly in the corner of a hallway at midnight with a sketchbook in their lap, paying attention to everything. Because no one has ever asked them to look away.